sometime in 1925, the people over in LaBelle, Hendry County were cajoled into passing a bond issue to do paving on the Fort Myers to West Palm Beach Highway, which had been something that had been going on already over 10 years, and it hadn't really gotten any much further than LaBelle at the time, and that with the understanding that the highway contractors would hire local help, and LaBelle at that time, 1925 or 26, was already a depressed or still a depressed area. The only people that were actually making money were either the people who had cattle at the time or the people who were doing the subdividing and selling land unseen and so forth. And when they started the construction, what the road contractors did, instead of hiring local help, they brought in foreign African Americans, if you to use the correct term for nowadays. And of course, that was a time period when you didn't. The Klan was strong all over the country. I mean, for instance, Indiana was basically controlled by the Klan. They had the Million Man March or whatever it was, and in Washington D.C. with everybody in their white robes and white hoods and so forth on it. And of course, they got it where the local people did not like blacks at all, and we had very few in the LaBelle area at that time. You go and check census records, 1900, 1910, 1920, even up to 1930, you're going to be doing lucky to find in the LaBelle area more than maybe 15 people that list their race as either black or in for mulatto, or in some instances mixed, and what have you, because they just weren't there. And of course, there were people who were extremely upset. Now, the story is that a Mrs. Crawford, who was hard of hearing, it was in May of 1920, May of 1925, 26,
25, 26.
Was evidently a hot time at the time, and she was ironing. And of course, back in those days, ironing was an all-day thing, and they were probably doing lucky. She probably was having to heat her irons on a stove, but she had moved her ironing board out in the breezeway or on the back porch or something. She was hard of hearing, and this Patterson, we know as his last name, and he sometimes you see his first name as James and other times as Henry, but that supposedly that he went up on her back porch to ask could he get a drink of water, and that she did not hear him coming up because of being hard of hearing to start with, and that when she finally, evidently did make enough noise, or excuse me ma'am, that it startled her, and she turned and she looked, and she wasn't used to seeing blacks at all, and that she screamed and yelled, and that evidently they were close enough to where that there were some local men who had no jobs and so forth. When she screams, the black man starts running. What the whites do is that they evidently put 1 and 2 together and come up with 5, and they assume that this woman has been attacked. Now, she does say later on that she screamed simply because that she was startled and she wasn't used to seeing blacks. Now, of course, they catch him. There was somebody that evidently was in, that had something to do with the construction crew, because he supposedly said, "Boss, you knows me. You knows I's never done anything wrong, but that he doesn't do anything." All right, he escapes. They track him down. They track him down, and the story that I heard was they tracked him down in the back of Judge Doty's property, which was within spitting district of the Hendry County Courthouse at the time. It's about where where the old U-Save B&B supermarket in LaBelle used to be, in there. They tracked him. They caught him there. They started. I think they shot him, and I think that supposedly what they did was that they had different people, sort of like in the killing of Mr. Watson, where that everybody took a pot shot at him, and then they put a rope around his neck and drug him through the downtown streets on it, and even and then went and hung him from a pine tree in the area about 4 blocks south of the courthouse. Now, when I was a kid in the early 1950s, I was shown a pine tree, and there were 2 shoes that were at the base of the pine tree that were already almost totally disappeared. You could see a little bit of the shoes left, and supposedly those were the shoes that had fallen off of his feet, that they left there for years and on it. And that the story is that when it had to be investigated, and the H.A. Ryder was an attorney who hadn't been in LaBelle that long, and he had been hired as the county attorney. So of course he was a prosecuting attorney, and the county judge at the time was Wesley Richards, and he was the county judge. And that who do you arrest? This, that, and the other. No witnesses. No witnesses.
Wasn't there a young boy that
this comes in. There was a young boy, and I can't remember. I think he was related to an Altman, but I'm not going to swear to it.
I think so.
I don't think that was his last name, but that he did give information that was there, but no adults would give any information.
J.P. Cruz was his name.
Cruz, okay. And the Cruz family, for instance, one of the Cruz daughters was married to Leo Englehart of the funeral home in Fort Myers, Alma.
Okay. All right.
And then Addie Mills, who was over there, she and Alma were sisters, and that's a different story. But what happens is that in fact they even call them the state militia in, and Sumter Lowry was a name that may not be familiar to many of you, but Sumter Lowry ran for governor several times, and he was a staunch segregationist, and he also at the time I think happened to have been the commanding general of the Florida National Guard on the thing. That Sumter Lowry would have been in it, and they brought the people in, and they had the militia in. They ended up moving the trial and everything over from LaBelle, which was Hendry County at the time, over here to Lee County, and they ended up to where that they never could indict anybody because they didn't have enough evidence to do it. Because all of a sudden people, I don't remember anything.
The young
I wasn't
boy
there.
did name names. He did, in the names, I'm going to read them just so everybody
Okay.
here knows. Harvey Altman, Ham Smith, Dick Curry, Norman Warner, Mr. Howard Cole Mercer, Stanley Altman, just Curry, Dan Blunt, and Frazier as having been in the mob or aiding in the actual lynching or both. So that young boy knew, he was just a young boy's eyes. He knew everybody in that town.
Okay, and some of those names are still, for instance, Curry's were named over there. Warner, there were Warners in Alva on it. You've got the names that you just mentioned. You know, they were people that were well known in the community.
Now let me say this too. At some point, the town gave this little boy's father's problems because the little boy testified. I mean, so at some point everybody did shut up. They didn't remember.
Well, or they disappeared. They moved away, and nobody knew where they were. And it's what you got that, and then for years afterwards. H.A. Ryder, who later became county judge, he served one term as county judge, and he was also later than that was mayor of LaBelle. He stuck around, but even his children were called nigger lover for years.
Yeah, they were really mean to the people's children. They made their lives miserable.
On it, and you know, and it's just, there was a Teresa Proverbs that did some articles on it that I think she sold with some magazines. But she, I think, was instead of being I personally don't think that she's actually a historian. What she was is she was shock journalism because you know she wanted to get something that she could sell something and make good money off of it.